Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and it just amazes me that when Rand Paul, one of the very few people out there that tells you some semblance of the truth and fights for your civil liberties, doesn't matter what color you are, doesn't matter what gender you are, right? Because honestly, amidst COVID-19 84 and the ever-growing media, military, industrial, complex authoritarianism that is gripping tighter, and tighter, that is out there, he's the guy who's saying, you know what? Why aren't we talking about herd immunity anymore? Why are we praising New York and Cuomo? And the media spins this with Faucian language. Boy, Fauci really got him with saying you haven't been listening to the CDC. Well, the CDC just put out a draft where they say this thing is airborne, which is something we've been saying since the beginning, right? That it was airborne. But then that goes against their mask narrative of it helping, because if it's airborne, it goes through these masks. Remember, in the very beginning, they were talking about P3 masks. You never hear that anymore. That was the reality, right? Now it's paper masks, be a slave, do your thing. Okay? That goes, viral that they say that, and then they pull it back and say it was just a draft. It was just a draft. So then why'd you put it on paper, and how did it make it out into, the digital ether? So certainly you weren't thinking about it. Certainly it wasn't reported by many other people in the medical and scientific field all the way back in March. Oh, wait, it was. Just like vitamin D was, just like vitamin C was, just like steroid treatments were. But it's never been about a treatment, has it? So they demonize Rand Paul when he tells the truth. But there are a lot of facets I want to go over, because they also talk about these college outbreaks. And if you've been following my journey in Oneonta lately, we were the big hot spot. And they made it national headlines in the New York Times that we had a COVID outbreak here. Okay? And it was because of parties. But what they didn't tell you is they didn't test any of the kids on the way in. They came with it. They didn't tell you 95+% completely asymptomatic. They were partying in the isolation dorm before they sent them home. And they didn't tell you they had over 800 plus confirmed cases and 0 hospitalizations. And when I started going public with that, all of a sudden they had 1 hospitalization up. And I went in and I asked how old the person was. I didn't ask for the personal information and whether they had any pre-existing conditions. Do you think I got a response? No, I got deleted. And I'll tell you this. When I was getting this haircut today, I was asking around. There might not be anybody in the hospital. There's nobody in Bassett. So are they straight out lying? And then you ask yourself, well, how many positives and 0 hospitalizations, or maybe 1 hospitalizations per person could you possibly have, Jason? Well, 14,000 with the students accounts for about 6,000 plus with the students are about 6,000 plus, maybe 8,000 people here. Okay, 800 plus cases. It's 848, I believe. That's about 1 in 15 people. Nobody's in the hospital. That should be a great news. That should actually help the argument of this man, Rand Paul, but instead they want to fine people for not wearing masks on the street in my community. That's the upside down, guys. So we're going to show you all these videos. We're going to go over it start to finish. What I need you to do is thumbs this up, subscribe, and share, because we're 5.5 months demonetized. Okay? No end in sight. New age restrictions are coming. I don't know. I haven't cursed yet. Is this for the under 18 crowd? Guess it doesn't matter because I don't have an under 18 audience. But $5, $10, $15, it's how we're doing it several times a day. I had a lot of tech issues yesterday. That's why we did the super late night videos. Go check those out if you missed them. Remember, documentary films are free in the playlist section here. Thumbs it up, subscribe, share, ring that bell for notifications. And we did do an exclusive on Rockfin for free yesterday. Make sure you have a free account over at Rockfin, and you can go check that out right now. We're going to be doing so much more with Rockfin in the future. So, before we start and we get into these hearings, and I want to show you the college lie. Okay? Because it's a lie. Again, have they shown you any of these college kids across the nation that have died? How many have even been hospitalized now? The term case-demic, and not even bringing up the fact that there seemed to be a lot of false positives with this PCR test as reported in the New York Times. Really make you go, what's really going on here? So I want to show this to people because this is the college outbreak thing. Let's see what he has to say.
We're not risking safety and efficacy. Is that your testimony?
Yes, it is. That's absolutely correct.
Now, millions of students are going back to thousands of colleges, and there are inevitably outbreaks of COVID-19, Dr. Fauci. Is the smart thing for college administrators to do is to send those college students home when the outbreaks occur on campus?
Absolutely not, Mr. Chairman. They should be able to accommodate the students in a facility, maybe a separate dorm or a separate floor, so they don't spread among the...
Now, guys, think about what he's saying. Now, what happened here? You saw they were calling kids in the middle of the night that had no symptoms, that had tested positive, and what ended up happening? They were throwing parties in the dorm. Let's scroll down. Let's see where we're at. You know, they made bars clean out with hazmat suits, all right, during this ridiculous scare in the beginning of it. And then, let's see, where is it? There they are. Who are the real bad apples? Go watch that one. See that? That's a bunch of kids in the isolation dorm that are so sick. They need to be isolated, drinking White Claws and having a party. Okay? And then they did send them home. But here's the thing. They didn't go home. The vast majority of them did what they could to stay here. There was a couple thousand on campus. I'd say at least 400 or 500 of them found apartments here. All right? And they didn't even talk to you about the 200 or so kids that were already in the community. So now he's going to talk about community spread. Again, there's nobody here that's dying. And we have one of the biggest hot spots in the nation. This is so important to go over when we get to Rand Paul.
The student body, but do not send them home to their community because of the likelihood of then reseeding infection in a community.
Well, that's what they did.
Dr. Fauci, I've listened to your...
And here's the thing. They knew they would pop hot before they got here. Okay? We haven't had an update now in over a week from Otsego County. They knew they would pop hot before they got there. They wanted their money. All right? That's why the locals went along with it, because they're literally liberal lapdogs for Andrew Capo Cuomo, who didn't really care much about the money of the kids. He just wanted the scare. And that's why his little chancellor let this happen. Look at this. 686 confirmed cases linked to SUNY Oneonta, students or close contacts of students. Okay, that's over 1/10 of the student population. 1 out of 10. Okay, and notice that they also say close contacts and students. All right, 848 total cases. Okay, all right. They clearly haven't tested thousands of people. You would have well over 1,000 cases here. Again, is there any information on this person's age and health? Nobody. Nothing. Nada. Zip. Zilch. Okay? I got nothing there. You know? Just say no. Stop testing without symptoms. Don't wear the mask. I'm with this person, by the way. But you look at this, and it's like, what is going on here? Oh, did that go away? I'm sorry. There it is. So is there not 2 comments? I don't understand, because that wasn't even there the other day when I went to look at it. Did everybody else just delete their comments? So again, they're saying 1 hospitalization. Wouldn't this suggest herd immunity? The vast majority of those kids were coming from what? New York City and Long Island. Yet Andrew Cuomo said that the spread in college students, we played the video, was from out-of-state students. All of this is just nonsense. Okay? All of it's nonsense. And now, again, the CDC says it's airborne. Now it's not airborne. And in my community, what? They want to fine you for not wearing a mask. One of the biggest outbreaks, nobody's sick.
Get the comfort, quality, and style you expect.
Let's just take that down. Sorry about the commercials, guys. I got to get the ad block on here. Again, we reformatted. Good time to thumbs the video up, subscribe, and share. But again, Len Carson is the only person here that's making any sense.
Care and precision. And
recent outbreak of coronavirus cases at SUNY Oneonta, the city of Oneonta, is looking at what it can do to stop the spread of the virus. At tonight's Common Council meeting, a proposed mask ordinance was brought up for discussion. The proposed ordinance is very similar to that of New York State Health Department's requirement that a mask be worn when social distancing is not possible. Council members differed in opinion on how broad of an ordinance the mask mandate would be. Some wanted it to apply just to Main Street, while others wanted to include a larger portion of the city.
The whole city.
Councilman Len Carson questioned the necessity of the city enacting their own mask mandate.
Damn right.
We already have an executive order in place that clearly defines that if you can't maintain your 6-foot social distance, that you're supposed to put a mask on. This seems like overreach on our part. If this passes whenever, who's going to enforce it? How are they going to enforce it is my question. Because is it people taking pictures? How are you going to measure the distance? Or is it the police officers or the code enforcement officers that have to physically see these individuals not adhering to the executive order? So there's some...
I mean, come on. It's
No
all
vote
ridiculous.
was...
It's all ridiculous. So now, you've heard Fauci. You've seen all the evidence. Watch Rand Paul dismantle this guy. And again, it's trending that somehow Fauci's a hero in this one.
Senator Paul.
Initially, government officials were honest enough to admit that the goal of mitigation efforts, aka lockdown, was to flatten the curve. But the area under the curve, the total deaths from the virus, would likely be the same. In other words, the lockdown was to mitigate the spike in viral deaths so our hospitals would not be overwhelmed, but the same amount of people would likely die with or without the lockdown. The media, and frankly government officials, seem to have forgotten this important caveat. Flattening the curve morphed into a belief that we could change the course of the pandemic with an economic lockdown. This is unfortunate and has led to the protracted lockdown recession we are currently mired in. It's important that we examine the data, learn from the data, and try to avoid the man-made aspect of this calamity in the future. To those who argue that the lockdown flattened the curve in New York and New Jersey, the evidence argues otherwise. New York and New Jersey wound up with the sharpest spike or highest death rate in the world at over 1,700 deaths per million. In contrast, Sweden had a relatively softer touch. Few mandates and mostly voluntary guidelines. Sweden's death rate ended up about a third that of New York and New Jersey.
Oh.
Some might argue that Sweden and New York and New Jersey are different populations, perhaps. But even the average death rate for the U.S. is now greater than Sweden. In fact, the U.S. death rate is quite comparable to less developed parts of the world where social distancing is virtually impossible, such as Brazil, Bolivia, and Ecuador. Which brings us to an important question. Is man really capable of altering the course of an infectious disease through crowd control? The statistics argue a resounding no.
I just got to say, everything he just said right there was super on point, and he's the demon. He's the demon. You know, the doctor and the son of the doctor. They're the demons. You know, people that have actually had patience.
The evidence argues that mitigation efforts have failed to flatten the curve, that most countries, regardless of public health policy, suffered a significant spike in deaths and then a gradual decline. Now, some will argue, what about Hong Kong, Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, each which have had extraordinarily low death rates? Hong Kong, Taiwan, and South Korea certainly enforce stricter quarantine and contact tracing rules than the U.S., but Japan's rules were largely voluntary since their prime minister lacks the legal powers to enforce a lockdown. One explanation for the low death rate in much of Asia is that the population may have a higher degree of exposure to coronavirus colds, and therefore have more pre-existing cross-reactive immunity. If scientists were interested, there is a fascinating field of inquiry looking at susceptibility to COVID-19 and assessment of whether people not have pre-existing immunity to similar coronaviruses.
You know what? Again, never going to hear that in the media. Nope.
In fact, pre-existing cross-reactive immunity to coronavirus may explain why we have so many people that have very little symptoms or asymptomatic. While there's still many things we need to learn about this pandemic, it's important that we, the people, not simply acquiesce to authoritarian mandates on our behavior without first making the nanny state prove their hypothesis. As for now, what we do know is that New York and New Jersey and Connecticut and Rhode Island still allowed the highest death rates in the world. We also know that Sweden, who enforced few mandates, ended up with a death rate 1/3 of New York and New Jersey. We also know that the overall death rate for the U.S. now is essentially equivalent to that of South America, where social distancing and mitigation efforts are virtually impossible. Dr. Fauci, today you said you are not for economic lockdown, yet your mitigation recommendations from dating to baseball to restaurants to movie theaters have led to this economic lockdown. Do you have any second thoughts about your mitigation recommendations, considering the evidence that despite all of the things we've done in the U.S., our death rate is essentially worse than Sweden, equivalent to the less developed world that is unable to do any of the things that you've been promoting? Do you have any second thoughts? Are you willing to look at the data that countries that did very little actually have a lower death rate than the United States?
You know, Senator, I'd be happy at a different time to sit down and go over detail. You've said a lot of different things. You've compared us to Sweden, and there are a lot of differences. And you said, well, you know, there are a lot of differences between Sweden, but compare Sweden's death rate to other comparable Scandinavian countries.
Let's stop. Scandinavian? Why don't we just talk about European countries? You see, this guy is such a punk. I mean, come on, man. Come on, man. We've gone over it. Italy, Spain, Germany all had higher counts, all had restrictive lockdowns. Look at the disdain in this guy's face for the facts actually being said in public and put into the public record forever via government. He's like, we couldn't buy this guy out. Ugh.
It's worse. So I don't think it's appropriate to compare Sweden with us. Yes, we have, I think in the beginning, we've done things based on the knowledge we had at the time. And hopefully, and I am, and my colleagues are humble enough and modest enough to realize that as new data comes, you make different recommendations. But I don't regret saying that the only way we could have really stopped the explosion of infection was by essentially, I want to say shutting down. I mean,
when I say shutting down, I mean eviscerating the economy, taking out the middle class, you know, really serving my dark overlords and my own interests. That's what I really mean, okay? Don't you get it? I can't believe you have the nerve to do this, Rand Paul. And remember, Fauci is being portrayed as the hero in this one over on social media.
In essentially having the physical separation and the kinds of recommendations that we've made.
You've been a big fan of Cuomo and the shutdown in New York. You've lauded New York for their policy. New York had the highest death rate in the world. How could we possibly be jumping up and down and saying, oh, Governor Cuomo did a great job? He had the worst death rate in the world.
No, you misconstrued that, Senator, and you've done that repetitively in the past.
Look how angry he is. That's about as angry as you're going to see the guy. This guy's a war criminal, in my opinion. He needs to be charged with war crimes. It shows how dark things really are within our technopoly, within our system of, again, a media, military, industrial complex. This is about as angry as you're going to see him. And watch him go nuts. This is it. This is full board. He just says that, you know, Rand Paul is a liar. No, he did have the highest death rate.
Past. They got hit very badly. They've made some mistakes. Right now, if you look at what's going on right now, the things that are going on in New York to get their test positivity 1% or less is because they are looking at the guidelines that we have put together from the task force of the 4 or 5 things of masks, social distancing, outdoors more than indoors, avoiding crowds, and washing hands.
Total lies. I just showed you. He said, oh, well, we can't shut down the colleges. Well, they did here. And they were amongst this community. And then they sent them back there. So what Rand Paul's about to say is, what about herd immunity? And that's not on the table. That's when he really flips his lid, right? What are they talking about? There's been a multitude of protests. That's crowds throughout my entire state. We've shown them to you, whether it be in Rochester, in New York City, in the Albany area. We went to one. No one's social distancing. No one's wearing masks. This man is a liar, okay? The Chainsmokers concert, all right? The NYU park parties. This guy is a liar. He's a liar. He's a liar. He's a liar. He's a liar. Okay? So here comes Rand Paul saying, well, doesn't this suggest, and again, look at those numbers in my own community. Nobody's sick. It does suggest a type of herd immunity, but this guy says, no, 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 no. You don't read the CDC that can say whatever they want, put out whatever they want, and then if they get challenged on it, what? Oh, it's just a draft. It was a mistake.
Or they've developed enough community immunity
Right.
that they're no longer having the pandemic because they have enough immunity in New York City to actually stop
York
it.
I
State.
challenge that, Senator, because
I'm afraid
I want, please, sir, I would like to be able to do this because this happens with Senator Rand all the time. You were not listening to what the director of the CDC said, that in New York, it's about 22%. If you believe 22% is herd immunity, I believe you're alone in that.
There's
Look
also
at his little smirk. And he's about to put on his slave mask. See, I play team slave.
the pre-existing immunity of those who have cross-reactivity, which is about a third of the public in
think
many
we'll have to
estimates from
reserve this
studies,
discussion.
which would actually get you
We
to
have
about
other
two-thirds.
senators.
I'd like to talk to you about that also because there was a study that recently came out that pre-existing immunity to coronaviruses that are common cold do not cross-react with the COVID-19.
Thank you, Senator Paul. Senator Murphy.
Look, he's
thank
so
you very
proud of
much.
himself. He's so proud of himself. All right? Give me a break. Give me a break. Guys, what you just saw was a lot of harmful content, okay? So if you can, no super chats anymore. I mean, again, they may never review my channel. I don't know. I may get kicked off. The age restriction stuff, my channel might get age restricted. Who knows? How dare I play, hearings in the halls of government that are supposed to be of the people and by the people, for the people, and then make commentary on it that might go against the grain of authoritative sources and the CDC and the WHO. They're allowed to lie, just like Hearst Publications and Esquire. They'll never get fact-checked. That's why I need your support, guys. $5, $10, $15. It means the world to me. Big donors need you now more than ever. About to hit the road. Moving to Iowa at the beginning of the month. This is the last week you're going to see me here. There's going to be a lot of big changes once I get there. After this, I'm actually going to make some calls. I'm going to go turn on the water, the garbage, and the electric at the new place. So any kind of donations are greatly appreciated, guys. All the documentary films are free in the playlist section right here, right now on YouTube. And again, if you doubt me that Cuomo said those things about out-of-state students spreading it and all these things and the isolations, please go watch over 700 confirmed cases in Oneonta, New York. Please go watch that from a couple weeks ago. I implore you to. But again, in the playlist section, if you just scroll right down, that's where you're going to find all the documentary films. Shade the Motion Picture, Invisible Emperor, A New World Order to Find, Fabled Enemies, and Loose Change Final Cut. And remember, guys, sign up for Rockfin. Make the free account, okay? That's a free video from yesterday. That is an exclusive. You can only get it there. And we're going to be doing so much more via this in the coming weeks. I promise you that. Thank you so much for joining me. Get the word out, and I'll see you on the flip side.